to tell a story of a person, a friend that I met when I was in rehab for the 678th time. And that's another testimony to how evil the medical system is. So try to not get sick as long as possible, because if you are in bondage to this system, it will destroy you. So there was a guy with me there, and I think he was still I was still very young too, but he was like at the most 20 or 21 or something, and he I think he got Ritalin, which is like it's chemically it's not an amphetamine, but it's basically it works the same. It has the same effect, and he took magic mushrooms way too early in his life or something, and he had a bad trip, and he as far as I know, he went to the doctors and they told him that he has schizophrenia, and then they give you these awful medications like Seroquel, which makes you gain weight, and now I have like 80 kilos, and I used to have 115. So that's what these medications do to you. And so the thing that I'm thinking about is he said to me that I'm hearing voices in my head, and back then I was an atheist, so I thought, yeah, so he has schizophrenia. But it's not that these voices don't exist. And if you read the Bible, there was a man called Jesus who heard the voice of God. And if he would have gone to the doctor, they would have prescribed him things like Seroquel and these terrible antipsychotics. There's another one that's unbelievably disgusting. That's where you're basically drooling and moving in slow motion. and talking in slow motion and smoking one cigarette after another in slow motion. And this stuff they would give to basically children, because in this age you're not an adult, in my opinion you're not an adult until you're like 35. So I met a lot of guys who were like 17, 18 and already got these insane medications that you used to get if you were like a violent, criminally insane person, dangerous. And I also had an acquaintance who was he was placed on a gurney and basically they put him like in a straight jacket and on a gurney so that he could not move, and he was like in there for that's an insane story. So in the small village where I'm at, there were like a few drug enthusiasts, and when I was into sports, I was a lot into sports. I was into tennis, golf, snowboarding. I was when it was winter, I was every weekend I was snowboarding, and I did martial arts and so on. So when I was into drugs, I was like similarly enthusiastic about that. So in this small village where I am, there was like at the most a dozen people who were similarly enthused, and we all had an overdose in the same night, although we were all in different places, because of some stuff that went around that's called MDPV, and in America I think it's called flakka. And all of these dozen people met in the one loony bin in the next city, the big city. So so basically all my friends and me were in the loony bin, completely out of our mind on that stuff, and we were there for I don't know how long, for a week or something, because like I don't know, a few of them were on the suicide watch, and one of them was really in a straitjacket and we would like wave into the door because it had a little glass window, and he was like at the most 18 or something. So that was that story. Orle im LSF gelandet. So what I was thinking about was, if you have a certain worldview that's non-religious and someone tells you that, oh my, you have voices in your head, and this guy happens to be a doctor, what if you had a different worldview and you would be a Christian? Then you would um, know that there's no doesn't even make sense to go to the doctors because they all are uh, acting according to what medicine teaches, and there is no such things as voices in your head. Although if you read the Bible, there was a pretty famous person who our clocks are measured by. Now it's the year 2021, and he heard voices in his head. So just thinking about what if he went to a doctor. I mean, isn't that criminal to give something like what's the medication called where you're drooling, tramadol or something similar, something like that. And so you're considered an adult when you're 18, but are you really an adult when you're 18? Because you know nothing about the real world, and you have this worldview that there is no such thing. So there is no such things as demons, but it's not true. That's not true. And I just wonder if that person would have been taught the gospel, that these things exist. They are not common. Usually you can open yourself up unknowingly to demons by Ouija boards and so on. And I remember there's also another story I remember from school when I was like 13, 14. We played with a Ouija board on a school skiing trip, and we were sitting in a circle and we wrote the alphabet on a piece of paper, and we used a small glass, and we each put one finger on it, and we asked questions. So something like that would open you up to demonic influences. And of course everyone said, "Are you pushing the glass?" "No, I'm not pushing the glass." "Sure, you're pushing the glass." "No, I'm not pushing the glass. I swear I'm not pushing the glass." And the glass would move, and there would be intelligible answers to the questions, and it got a little spooky after a while, so I left. And we turned off the light. It was already like very late. It was dark outside. We turned off the light to play with this Ouija board that we made. And I stood up because it got a little spooky. The wind pushed one of the windows open very violently, so that really spooked me, and I got up and I turned on the light and I press the light button, and the thing explodes loudly. and I thought, wow, unbelievable, and I wanted to tell the guys in the next room, and I got into the next room and turned the light on there, and the light bulb exploded again. And I still remember that. I never forgot that happened. So I'm just wondering about like these people um, that I met in rehabs. How many of them could have been saved just by explaining to them the Bible? That and there's also a lot of misconceptions about demons and demonic influence. It's not usually like in a Hollywood movie, or not at all like in a Hollywood movie. It's a very subtle influence, but it has huge implications down the road. So if I, for example, if I could change just one thought every day, once a day, in your mind, I could, down the line, I could bring you to where I want you to be by just changing one thought in your brain. And it's a very subtle influence, and usually you can't notice that unless you meditate every day like a maniac. Then you notice these certain things that come to you, that these are not my thoughts. This is not what I usually think about. This just came to me. And you can learn to distinguish that these are my thoughts, these are not my thoughts. And if you work with demons or daimons, which did not always have a negative meaning, the word demon did not always have a strictly negative meaning. It comes from the word of God, and many civilizations like the Egyptians and the Greeks used to deify everything that's transcendental, that passes through everyone, like anger, pride, and all these things were considered godly or daimonic, and you could invoke these things on purpose to have these to just to take control of your thoughts. And if you do that every day, this has huge implications, and the more you do that, the more effective you become in doing it. And for example, if you just when I began to invoke the Archangel Michael, I immediately noticed that people would talk to me differently, treat me differently, especially in when you deal with officials or magistrates and so on. Suddenly they would be friendly and welcoming, and they used to treat me like uh, subhuman. And I mean, for example, one of the doctors once told me that he doesn't want people like me in his waiting room, and that he will treat me today, but I I should not come again, putting it very politely. And this happened to me several times and in way worse tone. And I mean, once I got screamed at by a doctor for no real reason, that I had his spit in my face. He screamed at me at the top of his lungs because of some mistake with the pharmacy or whatever. It's just insane. And I stayed completely calm, which made him even more angry. And then I said, "You don't have to yell at me, I'm not deaf," which made him completely flip out. And I think he tore apart my prescriptions and threw it. And so when I left his office, all the children in the waiting room were screaming and in tears because this doctor screamed at me for 20 minutes at the top of his lungs. So that's how I usually was treated. When I began to invoke angels, this changed. And like I said yesterday, people can't help but react to your morphogenic field. And I'm just I was thinking about this one person, and it's just semi-criminal what these doctors are doing sometimes to people who, if you take magic mushrooms, it's in the name that you are opening that stuff is taken for magic rituals to open yourself up to demons and spirits. Or ayahuasca, which these maniacs advertise massively on YouTube. Ayahuasca ceremonies, blah 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 blah. You have to take ayahuasca to expand your mind. No, you don't have to take any drugs to expand your mind. If you learn meditation, you can take complete control over your emotions and your thoughts, and that in turn gives you complete control over your outside world. And that's what as above so below means. And sometimes I wonder how many people could be saved just by explaining to them that many people hear voices in their heads. Carl Gustav Jung heard voices in his head. He even talked to them. And he said in an interview he heard a voice in his head, and he told him to get out of his head. And the voice in his head said to him, "What makes you think that your head belongs to you?" So, like, the most ingenious people that ever lived heard voices in their heads. And I can't help but wonder how many people could have been saved if this would be talked about or preached. Because it's not funny to see 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds get destroyed by these medications that they hand out like candy, and that's insane. So thank you for listening.